Okay, so for this one, we're going to be drawing a profile angle. And as with any portrait, we want to start by drawing our Loomis head. So we're going to draw a circle, and then we're going to draw our oval, which signifies the side plane of the head. Now, if you want to draw a more perfect circle, you can always use a compass tool. Then we're going to draw a vertical and a horizontal axis in the center of our side oval. We're going to pull the top of the oval over for our hairline. We're going to extend the horizontal axis over for our brow line, and then we're going to extend the bottom of the oval for our nose line. After that, we're going to draw our center line down on the right side of the face. We're going to extend our vertical line down at an angle and then connect that to the bottom of the center line. We're going to punch in some lines for our neck. We're going to erase this bit of the initial circle, and then we're going to identify our anchor points. The first anchor point is to signify the top of the upper lip, and then the bottom anchor point is to signify the bottom of the lower lip. And then we have our cheek plane here. And then I think what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to get the shoulder and the shirt out of the way. So I'm using the Loomis head and I'm pulling these lines over. And then that way I can use those as a basis for exactly how far out these lines need to be. Like say, for example, this line for the back, and then these lines here for the top of the turtleneck shirt that this gentleman has on. And you don't have to get too fancy schmancy with like the creases and stuff. I'm just having some fun here. We got like the creases, we have the stitching that runs along the top of the shoulder. And then what you can do is you can take a kneaded eraser and you can just very lightly hit your paper and make your Loomis head pretty much transparent. And then that way you can still see roughly where those guidelines are when it comes to punching in the features. So as with most reference photos, especially ones where we can see the ear, that is where we want to start. Okay, remember this, the ear will always be placed in the bottom rear quadrant of your side oval. And of course, when I say rear, I mean rear to the front of the subject's face. So we're just punching in this ear here. Notice how I've identified the outer shape of the ear, and then you can go in just like I'm doing here, and you can give it a rough two-dimensional shape and bring out a little bit more of the character of the ear if you want to, but this is also just a basic sketch. I'm showing you guys how to approach this portrait and give yourself the best chance of success as far as nailing your proportions, because let's be honest with each other, that is the single hardest thing to do. It's not shading, it's not blending, it's not detail work, it's the proportions of your subject. If you can't nail the proportions, then your drawing isn't going to look as realistic as it could. All right. Everything else will pretty much be done in vain if you can't nail this. So that's why we're doing this. So that's why I'm showing you these methods and this sketching technique. So now I like to go up and I like to follow and build my hairline up until the actual underlying hairline of my Loomis head here. See, so I've kind of solidified that. And then what I can do is I can use my Loomis head that's transparent underneath, and I can start to build the structure of my subject's hair on top of that, and all the while using the Loomis head as my proportional gauge for exactly how far back does that head need to go, right? And then here, these are what I call segments of hair. The segments of hair, by sketching them in like this, allow me to bring out the flow of the hair. And then for hair that's shorter, like this, I'm just very, very lightly sketching this in. Okay, I don't want to get too caught up on the segments of hair. And for those of you that don't know, segments are what I call the different sections of hair. Multiple sections come together to form a flow of hair, whether that hair be short, long, or somewhere in the middle. So just be aware of that. Okay, now we're going to switch from the Loomis method to the Assaro method. Now, what does the Assaro method do for us? It helps us identify the planes of the face, right? And so the first plane that we want to identify is what's called the nose bridge plane. So that bridge plane sits between the eyebrows. You can't really see it in this one simply because of the nature of the angle, with it being a profile angle. But the short of it is that you put a horizontal line and then you draw a vertical line up. That vertical line plugs into the corner of the eyebrow, just like this. And then we're going to draw our frame lines. So look at the Asaro head. We're going to pull this plane down. This plane plugs into the second frame line, and then the third frame line extends from the corner of the eyebrow. We can then simply connect all three of those lines, and that gives us our upper eyelid. And then once we have the upper eyelid identified, we can easily place the bottom of the eye. While I'm here, I'm actually going to just punch in the iris. Why not? And then when it comes to noses, profile angles are a little different because we still want to build them from the bottom up. But I find that sometimes if you extend the ridge of the nose down and out a bit, that can help you gauge proportion for how long that nose needs to be. So we can still use the underlying Loomis nose line, and then look at the Assaro head model. Notice the plane that I'm trying to bring out here. We have that bottom plane, and then we have our slope plane, and then you can't really see it, again, because of the nature of the angle, but there's also a ridge plane on the very top of the nose. It's going to have to more or less be a line for this one. But then after that's done, we want to pull the upper lip down. And then this gentleman has a short beard, and so I kind of want to sketch that out. Believe it or not, profile angles such as this are actually the easier ones because you don't have to worry about symmetry so much. But just like this, we have the upper lip and then the bottom lip. And then right here, I more or less want to solidify the chin. And then I can bring that down, and I'll connect that to just inside the edge of the turtleneck here. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. I'm happy with that. Now, with this one, I really wanted to spend some time and show you guys how you could start to bring out the character of the facial hair. So just like this, nice and light, especially if you're just sketching portraits, right? You're not actually doing a render for a client. I'm just pulling these lines nice and light, right? For this, I would recommend the 3-point grip. Don't do the overhand. That way you can just have maximum control of your hatch marks. But hatching in your facial hair like this is a really good practice for you to begin to understand hair flow. Especially on facial hair. Facial hair is almost more important than the hair on top of the head because of its very nature. The fact that it is very focal, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over those hatch marks, see how I've just lowered the value there. The reason why is because I've put hatch marks on top of hatch marks and then next to hatch marks as well in a second layer. And that has lowered the value for us. And that's how you want to do it, especially with facial hair like this. You just want to do a nice light layer first, and then you can go over different areas of that layer and you can emphasize different points, because if you actually look at the reference photo, he has different values within his beard throughout. Actually, in the center of his cheek, the value that is conveyed is the highest value. And that is because his hair is actually the thinnest right there. He's got a very, very light patch. But when you actually look at his mustache and you look at his soul patch and his chin and even underneath his jaw, the hair is extremely dense. And because of that, it conveys a much lower value. But just like this, now I'm starting underneath the sideburn. And I'm just moving very, very slowly. I'm being very intentional with my pencil strikes here. And then here I'm going to start from the bottom up, right? And really lean into the reference photo here. Make sure you understand the direction that you wish to push and pull your lines. Facial hair is very much something that is unique to the individual. It is an extension of them, and so it must be accommodated as such. And you need to make sure that you put just as much effort into the facial hair as you do the rest of your sketch. As mentioned, this is more or less practice for you. I wanted to kind of slow down and put this video in a slightly different gear as far as the facial hair goes, so that you can see how you can accomplish bringing out and accentuating those different flows of facial hair within the same subject. So and then here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thicken up the eyelashes, and then I also want to lower the value within the eyebrows. As time goes on, I'm slowly adding more and more detail work. As I told you guys I was going to do, I want to make sure that no one tutorial that I bring out is exactly the same. I want to focus on different points, albeit they're very similar, but that's because the way that I'm teaching you how to start to sketch portraits is very formulaic by its very design. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are artists that disagree and think that everything should be free-flowing and that there should be no structure to it whatsoever. I disagree with that. I don't think that that's accurate. I don't think that that is realistic. There are many, many potential artists out there that need to understand these basic principles in order for them to be successful. And once you understand the basic principles, then you can move on to being free flow and not having to worry about anything, and because you already know, right? Lots of people, sometimes it's hard for them to be empathetic to other individuals that simply don't know, or maybe they just don't have that natural knack for drawing like the other person does. And that is why I'm coming out with these videos, is because I do understand, I am empathetic to that need, and I'm going to make sure that these tutorials help you so that you can start to see, so that you can understand, so that you can use those principles in your own art and be successful and make something that you're proud of. But yeah, just like this. You can see how the hair coming down from the sideburn, it starts straight up and down, right? It starts vertical, and then it slowly kicks its way sideways and back towards the earlobe, the bottom of the ear. But then the hatch marks extending up from the turtleneck actually go vertical, and then they curl to the left towards the ear as well. And also focus on the different lengths that you use too for your strikes, right? Like now I'm being a little less intentional, right? My strikes are just a little bit longer, a little bit more spaced out. And you can clearly see what that gives us. That gives us a higher value, right? The closer those hatch marks are to each other, that value will lower, and you will have a much more dynamic drawing, especially when you compare the low values like we have for the mustache and the front part of the chin and soul patch below the lower lip as compared to the center of the cheek. Now, clearly, you can start to understand how much time you can spend bringing out detail in a portrait, if you will. Most of the time, it's very, very difficult to be able to throw in all the detail work in a single portrait study video simply because it takes just too long. Some of my original tutorials when I was drawing animals in charcoal and showcasing the 3-layered method, which is a drawing approach that I devised over the years myself, those videos were longer than a lot of movies. They were like an hour and a half long, but I started from the very, very beginning and kind of walked you through all of the different aspects of the drawing, of building those values, of blending and bringing out gradation and detail work and all the things. But with something like this, one of the reasons why profile angles have been such a part of the art community over the years is because of their inherent simplicity. Because you're dealing with the profile of the subject, you don't have to worry about symmetry. And so I would actually suggest that if you are a novice artist and you want to get into portraiture, you should dedicate pages upon pages in your sketchbooks to profile angles. They were all the rage during the Florentine Renaissance. If you actually look at a lot of the paintings that were done during that time, there is a significant portion of them that were profile. Profile, 3/4 turn, and straight on angles are the three main angles that you will find in portraiture. It's not until you start getting into murals and much larger pieces of art, like say battlefields and all kinds of things, where you start to see subjects with these extreme angles, whether they be looking down or looking up, or their facial expressions, right, where they're yelling or screaming or crying out in pain. That really kind of came to a head during the Renaissance. But for the longest time, lots of royals that would commission art pieces from different artists, all they would want, because it was the standard back then, we have to remember this was hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that they just wanted a profile. All right, you think about coinage for many nations across the world, their leaders are profiled. That's pretty much it for this one. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.